Alright, so this is sort of a step-by-step look at all the MIDI techniques we're going to use in Project 1. First thing that'll happen here when you open up the application is you will see this suite of tracks. Since we're not using any audio tracks in this project, you can go ahead and select the first 8 tracks, which are all audio, as you can see by the little blue icon there, and just hit delete. Because all we're going to be working with are MIDI tracks. One handy thing you can do is select the bottom track, and this little icon here means add another track of the same type. So you can just click on that, give yourself a bunch of tracks. Alright, so each MIDI track is identical, and by default they come up with this classic electric piano sound. As you remember from the first video though, we can assign any patch. A MIDI sound is called a patch, coming from the old days when they were literally patched together with patch cords on synthesizers. So if I say a patch, that's what I mean, an individual sound in a MIDI track. The first technique we're going to look at is the Midi Loops. So let's close the library, come over here to the Loops window over in the far right corner, click it open. As you recall, MIDI is green and audio is blue. So if you're going to use a MIDI loop, as I ask you to do in the project, anything in green will work. So let's scroll through. It really almost doesn't matter what you want, what you use. If you have an idea, though, of a kind of thing you want to use, you can come up to the instrument window here, and when you select all kits, all drums, kits, percussion, etc., it'll show you loops that just have that kind of sound. So if I say percussion, it's going to give me nothing but percussion loops. So here's my Japanese katana drums. Maybe that doesn't do much for me, and I try a little kabasa. Maybe I'm still not inspired. All right, so I'm just scrolling through here. Okay, maybe the lazy conga shuffle does it for me. All I have to do here is just drag it into a track, right? I just click and hold on the little icon here and just drag it into wherever you want it. So I just dumped it into the first couple of measures, and if I hit play, and I say, gee, that is perfect. I would like to have a whole bunch of that, and I'm just going to select the file, hold down the command button, which is right next to the space bar, and then hit the letter R. And that'll repeat that little lick as long as I hold it down. Let's say I think I should have another kind of maybe I want a little more rhythmic top end on it, so I'll put the Mexican mariachi drums in there and do the same thing. All right, now my composite rhythmic track sounds like this. It's a little bit odd, but let's say I liked it. Now, just because these things are loops and they're given to you by Logic, it doesn't mean you can't change them. That is, if you double click on it, you can see all the blobs that equate to the sounds that they've entered into the patch. So let's say I think I really need something on beat 1. So I'm going to take a loud one. And this is a really useful technique. I'm just going to hold down the Option key, and now as I drag this, it's going to make a copy of it. All right, so it left this one, but it gave me another of the identical note that I'm going to stick here on the first beat. So now my and if I decide, you know, I'd really like that little hit on all of them, I can just come in here, get rid of these guys, select it again. This is the new version. Maybe I want 2 hits. This is the new version. This is the altered version of the loop that I just made to suit my purposes, and now I'm just going to repeat that. So instead of that empty beat at the beginning, I've got 2 hits. Right? So just because something is a loop doesn't mean you can't alter it. In fact, oftentimes you want to, because it's going to have some musical quality that you don't quite agree with, right? So loops are very, very easy and help you get started really quickly. And for that reason, I'm kind of limiting you into only using maybe 2 or 3 per snippet, just because, you know, then you won't explore any of these other possibilities. All right, so that's MIDI loops. Pretty straightforward and easy to use. The second MIDI technique here is going to be just live recording, which is maybe the most basic and most straightforward kind of use of MIDI. So for this, I want to change the sound because I don't happen to want to use classic electric piano. And I'm going to try some kind of bass sound because that always seems to be the next obvious place to go after getting a rhythm track. So I'm just going to pick from their possible bass sounds. Let's try the thumb bass. All right, so I'm just playing the MIDI keyboard I have. That's going to give me the notes I need. All right, so my recommendation is to not overthink this. Just kind of do any old thing that seems to come into your head. And the nice thing about MIDI is you can always fix things. All right, so there's my little bass line. Let's say I want it to start right away. So if you zoom in here, and these 2 little sliders here will zoom you, the one on the right zooms lengthwise, that's time, right? And then the one on the top zooms just graphically so you can see the track bigger. These are very useful things. I would get used to operating with these. You can also deal with these on the computer keyboard. If I hold down the command button and then the up and down and side to side arrows will do the same thing, right? So I'm holding down command and I'm pressing left arrow, that zooms me way out. If I press right arrow, that zooms me way in, right? So now I'm only looking at the first 8 measures. If I press the up arrow, that makes the track smaller, and if I press the down arrow, that makes the track bigger. These are really, really useful because the amount you can see affects a lot about, you know, how you can use the program. So, by the way, hitting spacebar, that's just play. So I started it late, right? So I missed the little thing I did on beat 2. So there's a number of ways I can go about that, but the easiest is to go ahead and double click. Note that the little line that tracks along with where you are in the piece, it's the same, right? So if I move it to this beat in the main window, it's the same beat in the edit window. So I just want to select this, and I'm going to do the same trick. First I want to zoom in here. I'm just going to hold down the Option key, and that's going to drag a copy. And I want it on beat 2. So now my little bass riff is going to be the same. You know, but that's kind of nicer, that little doot, 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 doot. So maybe I want to put that in bump, 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 bump. So really, I would like to start this little bass line here, right? This is where I thought to do that thing. So I'm just going to slide this little guy over, and those notes aren't going away. I'm just not using them, right? And I'm just going to take this chunk where I happen to do that thing that I liked, and use that instead. I'm going to drag it back here. It's like Legos, but with music. And I'm going to repeat that a couple of times. So here's my little lick. Okay, so it's really just that easy. I mean, I think the best approach is to just not think too much, play a little bit, mess around, see what works. Sometimes it's just one little chunk, but it's easier to isolate it and move it around and fix it in the program than it is to sort of obsessively try and re-record things too much to get it perfect, because it's just not efficient. And I think we have to try and let the program help us in the things that it does well, and not feel like we're cheating, right? There's not really any such thing as cheating when it comes to creating. Okay, so I got my little bass sound. Say I like that, right? So that's a simple and easy way to think about live recording. So that's our second MIDI technique. Okay, the third MIDI technique I'm asking you to explore are the Midi Effects, right? So let's select a new track. I again don't really want the electric piano, or maybe I do. Yeah, let's say I do want the electric piano, just for no good reason. So I'm going to do something in the electric piano, but I'm going to pick a Midi Effects. So as I select this thing, remember that this channel strip is what's applying to this track of the audio, or the recording. So anything in this channel strip now is going to apply to whatever I'm doing here. Note that Midi Effects are right here below the EQ. And the two most useful ones, I would say, or the most easy to just sort of mess around with, are the Arpeggiator and the note repeater. The note repeater will just do exactly what it says. If I hold down the key, all right, it's giving me eighth notes, da 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 da. If I come in here and if I slide the slider, it'll give me slower notes. I don't know why you'd want to repeat something every 2 bars. That little T means triplets. Let's do some 16th note triplets. All right, so I'm just holding down I'm only holding down the first note, and it's giving me those triplets. All right, so let's just see if that does anything for me. Again, I think the best way to approach it is just to grab something, give it a try, see what happens, without thinking too much in advance, if that makes any sense. Yeah, really not. So let's just go ahead and delete that. All I have to do is, once it's anything that's highlighted, can just be deleted. Forget what note I was playing. So that's an easy thing to find out. Just click on the note in the edit window, and you get an F sharp. All right, so maybe I'll try a more relevant harmony. Maybe I'll go a little higher too. Let's try that. Like one or two of those things. Let's see. Sometimes you throw a bunch of stuff on the wall and see. That one I liked. So I'm just going to take that one measure out of all that crap and say boom and repeat. It's not earth-shaking, but let's say I like that. All right, so that's a good thing to use. Let's look at the arpeggiator again. Let me get a different sound here. Maybe a blip, blip, blip. Maybe a mallet. Maybe some vibes. I don't know. And I'm gonna come in here to the Midi Effects, select the arpeggiator. You got a bunch of options here, and you can see what's going to happen. I'm just holding 2 notes, and it's alternating them. If I hold 3 notes, it's going to alternate that way. If I say down, it does the same thing, but starts on the upper note. If I go up and down, you get the idea. If I do 4 notes, all right, so you can change what's happening depending on, and as you hold down more notes, interesting things happen. All right, so again, I'm just going to sort of start it and see if I like anything I do. Okay. All right, so I just held on 1 chord. No, nothing too fancy. I started in a weird spot, so let's see if that needs to be fixed. Yeah, it doesn't bother me. Let's say I like it. Okay, so this is a lot of fun. I would recommend checking that out. If I change the octave range, it does exactly what it says, which is kind of nice, right? Okay, I'm going to go with that. Let's see. The next technique I want you to look into is the automating of volume. Super useful, very, very common to use more complex volume than simply setting the levels. That is, if you look at the mixer, these first channels and then the bottom 2, the volume sliders obviously have control over it. If I pull them out, and in general, what you're looking for is a baseline level where everything sounds pretty good. But sometimes you want there to be more movement, right? You want something else to happen in the track other than just flatline, steady state kind of motion in terms of dynamics. So the way to do this is come up to this little icon here. See it's right underneath the back to the beginning or stop button, and when you click it, it sort of snaps you into a different version of the track. Right? Notice that the notes are sort of grayed out or not accessible, and it doesn't look like anything has happened. So see this line here that's running through the top 2/3? If you click it, that's the basic volume level of wherever you happen to be. I moved all those faders so that it's not 0. Normally it would be exactly at 0 dB. Right about there. Okay, which is sort of the baseline, what's called unity gain. That's where everything starts. It may seem a little bit weird to start at 0 and have it be this high. That is, you got all this negative dB that you can add, and then not so much positive dB, but that's just the standard. All right, so everything's going to come up baseline right there. So let's say this little Tinkerbell thing, I want it to kind of fade in and fade out. All right, so what you need there are these little nodes. So all I'm doing is clicking on the straight line, and you can do this as many times as you want, if you wanted something more complicated. And then I'm going to click and hold with the mouse and drag it down. And that's just a volume fade in And maybe I'm going to fade it down a little bit and fade it up again. See if that works for me. All right. And when you play it, then you can see it track along with the volume. And it'll move this fader too, if you notice. Okay, so you don't have to just sort of set it and forget it when it comes to volume. In fact, you should almost never do that, because as you go through the mix, as you go through trying to build some dynamic interest into your piece, you almost always want to change the volume someplace. Okay, so once you get your snippet so that it's all the way done and you are totally happy with it, or just have to be done, what you're going to do, and let me reduce all this so that it's shorter because I don't have anything else. So let's say this was your whole snippet. What you're going to do is it's called bouncing. And then bouncing is, again, another old analog audio studio technique where they would have a bunch of tracks on one reel-to-reel tape machine, and then they would record all of those tracks onto a separate 2-track tape machine to make a stereo master. Right, so they would be bouncing. They would go back and forth between different tape decks, and they call that bouncing. So for absolutely no reason other than that's just what people have always said, we still call it bouncing in the digital domain, even though there is no such process really going on. So to do this, there's a number of ways to bounce, but we are just going to say, come up here to the file menu, come down to bounce, and we're going to say project or section. Actually, let's just do this and grab all of them. Because we had other tracks that we've deleted, it'll go ahead and record that empty space that I don't want to do. Okay, I've selected the tracks. You come down to bounce, say project or section, and this is basically making a new audio file. And you can do one of a number of formats. PCM is just sort of a basic standard audio file that you could send to anyone, anywhere, and it would play as a regular audio file. MP3 obviously is compressed, something that you would post on the web. You can burn to DVD, you have other kinds of formats, but for right now I'm just going to do PCM. So let's not worry about any of this stuff, just use the default settings, and we're going to say OK. And it's going to ask us, what do you want to call this thing? Where would you like to save it? And I'm going to say, call it whatever, snippet 1. And I'm going to save it. Let's say I had a folder that I wanted to save it into, and that would show up. If I didn't see my folder, you click there and hold, and it'll let you see all the possible folders that you could save it into, so you find the one with your name on it and select that. So let's say my name is desktop. I'm going to bounce it there. Right, and it does that, and I say save, and I should have done that from the beginning, of course, and this is going to be my snippet 1, right, and this is different. This is the logic file, not the audio file, and I'm going to save that in the same spot. I don't want to save it in Logic because that's the default, and that's where everybody would be saving their things, and it would get to be a mess. So again, you find your own particular folder. Again, my name is desktop, so I'm saving it there, and organize it as a package, right? Because that's going to save all of the different information into the file, right? We don't have any movie, we don't have any sound designer, impulse responses, Apple Sound Library. We don't have any of this stuff, so we're fine. Okay, so I close that, and I come over here and look at, and there's my logic file. Okay, so if I click on play my snippet file, there it is. All right, and if I double click on my snippet file, it loads it back up again. And that's really the basics, right? So take it easy. Don't stress out about things. Try and have fun. These things are actually kind of fun. So have fun, and don't overthink things.